Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, as the Senate impeachment trial gets underway this afternoon, President Trump finds himself in Davos for the World Economic Forum. And he spoke this morning, talked nothing about impeachment, talked a lot about the economy, including the blue-collar boom that has occurred during his presidency.
This is a blue-collar boom. Since my election, the net worth of the bottom half of wage earners has increased by plus 47%, 3 times faster than the increase for the top 1%. Real median household income is at the highest level ever recorded. The American dream is back, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. No one is benefiting more than America's middle class.
And he talked about the trade deals, of course. He talked about America moving to energy independence, so we're not reliant on hostile nations like, say Iran. And then, of course, the question about the environment. And he was asked if he had a message for young Greta, who is also at Davos, and
she'll be speaking later today.
Oh,
she's
yeah,
already spoken.
Yeah, we've got a copy of her speech. The New York Times was generous enough to print it. We'll get to what she had to say. Here's what Trump had to say.
So you have a message for Greta Thunberg on the planet?
Well, we're doing the 1 trillion trees together with lots of other people and lots of other countries, and I'm a very big believer in the environment. We right now are doing extremely well in the United States, but what I want is the cleanest water, the cleanest air, and that's what we're going to have, and that's what we have right now.
Because the theme today is about climate change, just in case you were wondering.
And Greta's response is going to be 10 minutes of shame on you. So you can look forward to that. I mean,
I can't wait to hear her.
Actually, it's even more insulting than that. From her speech, our house is on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour. We are still telling you to panic and to act as if you loved your children above all else.
How dare you?
Presumptuous. Hey, why don't you act like you like your kids? You're grounded. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with what Trump had to say about the blue-collar boom and the data point that he relayed to support his case.
It's true. Every study I've seen says that the wage increases have been at the lower end. Something that amazes me about this as well, too, is that all the economist friends that I have, we talk about wages having stagnated at the lower end for a number of years. And to put something in perspective that they never consider, about service jobs, cash jobs, just in the restaurant industry itself, in 1970, $42 billion a year was spent in the restaurant industry. Last year, almost $900 billion was spent in the restaurant industry. My point here is that
how much of that went to Brandt's?
Half of it goes to Brandt's.
Half
of it to Brandt's.
You know
they're going to talk about restaurants at some point in time, so we might as well get it out of the way. It's Brandt's and Palatine. But this is actually a valid point. What I'm saying is there's been this huge increase in the number of cash-paying jobs. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second that anyone's going to stay off the rolls and not be counted. But just let's assume that maybe that is happening, and maybe wages in the service industry have been growing all along. And now, other types of low-end wages are growing as well, too. So I guess to put a fine point on it is that what Donald Trump says is absolutely correct. We are in the midst of a boom, and it's a boom being felt disproportionately by the lower end. What could be better?
And in addition to that, of course, Amy mentioned one of the thematics today is climate change, and you're going to hear from young Greta. I gave you a snippet of what she's going to have to say. And, for forgetting Greta for a second, if we could, just the how corporate America gets buffaloed into these hysterics. It's one thing to be concerned about it, and to be good stewards of resources and all of those things, to be efficient with the gifts that God has bestowed upon the planet. It's another thing to be forever calling for end days, and I just don't understand why so many C-suite executives genuflect before this hysteria.
Well, I think because if you criticize a 15-year-old girl, then all of a sudden you look terrible, and I think they're scared to death of doing that.
How about how about members of Congress that behave like 15-year-old girls?
Same. That's what they can't. That's when Donald Trump came out and criticized her. He was viewed as the devil. So the point here is that she's not just talking about climate change. She's talking about the evils of capitalism and how socialism should replace capitalism. So you have to understand that that's the theme behind this whole thing. Now, one thing that I will give her is that I believe that first stage capitalism and even libertarianism, it kind of presuppose an almost inexhaustible natural resources and climate. I don't think that second stage capitalism has to do that at all. I think that companies should care about their level of pollution and have to make it right regardless of what it is. And if products become a little more expensive because of that, I'm fine with it. But to ditch a system and institute socialism, which has been an environmental disaster, the only good thing about the environment that socialism ever does, it eliminates the rat population in major urban areas. You get that joke, by the way? They become food.
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's the only thing that it possibly does. Other than that, socialism is an environmental disaster.
And I don't know if you heard AOC wants not only your money, but she wants your power. So if you're a billionaire, she thinks that they should come and get some of your money, but more importantly, we want your power.
Of course, and I don't know if you heard John Cusack's speech yesterday at the Bernie Sanders rally.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely, wasn't it? A real live revolution.
Yeah.
What an absolute idiot. And by the way, I love him as an actor. I think Hot Tub Time Machine was spectacular.
What about Hot Tub Time Machine 2?
You're a real cinemaphile there. Hot Tub Time Machine, Jim.
Oh my gosh, it was a classic. If you don't agree to that, maybe you just didn't get it. How about that?
Yeah.
No, I mean the things that they're saying is terrifying. And it starts with billionaires too, but once they get the billionaires, then it becomes the multimillionaires, and then it goes down to everyone who has more than somebody else. Bernie Sanders yesterday talking about rent control being the answer to problems, of urban housing, and he knows full well that rent control makes rents go up by creating scarcity, and that happens in a relatively quick amount of time. And then all of a sudden, when he really messes up the housing situation, that's when the government can come in and and build those Beijing or St. Petersburg style tenements for everybody to live in, and then everyone has the same amount of nothing, and Bernie wins.
Well, here's the 2020 version of "You Didn't Build That." AOC saying, you didn't make those widgets. You sat on a couch while thousands of people were paid modern-day slave wages, and in some cases, real modern-day slavery. You made that money off the backs of undocumented people.
I don't. What are you even supposed to say to that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I was hoping you'd have something.
Right? No, I got nothing except it is absolute nonsense. It's ridiculous when the only way that they can further their agenda is to try to convince people that these are the worst of times. Now, this is a really tall order considering these may very well be the best of times. When we have you look at things that the middle and lower class have compared to 100 years ago. I argue now that if someone makes let's say $100,000 a year, they are factually and on a relative basis more wealthy than John D. Rockefeller. Just the only way you're supposed to measure money is by what it can buy. That's the only equation. And think of what it can buy in terms of health care, in terms of entertainment, in terms of communication. It blows it away. So they can say all they want that things are absolutely heading south, but they're just wrong, and it's not even debatable.
Well, I just have to say before I get to tariffs, it's pretty impressive range to go from Hot Tub Time Machine to paraphrasing Dickens. So
Thank
congratulations,
you.
that was
That
was really something.
That wide range.
You got to turn your microphone on so people hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. I thought you were mad I interrupted you. Excuse me.
Go
How has
ahead.
business been since Trump has taken office for you personally?
You mean business on the restaurant end?
Yes.
We think that the economic boom is helping us quite a bit. We have noticed that oil prices, when they went from $110 down to $40, we think that helped us quite a bit. This is going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back. We might not be the greatest example of what's working in that because we've had a a really strong clientele and a loyal clientele the whole time. So we're basically at max capacity, the whole time anyway.
Okay.
But I think it definitely helps. I think a lot of people are talking about, good things. Mostly what I take from this is you sit around the bar and you talk to people and everybody seems to be doing good. I think you have to work very hard right now to avoid getting a job and claim unemployment.
And how many slaves do you have working for you? I want to get to tariffs. This is a piece in the Wall Street Journal by the Wall Street Journal Ed Board talking about two new studies, economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Princeton, and Columbia. Another study by economists at the Federal Reserve, University of Michigan, and the Census Bureau, finding that, look, you got these deals done, and yes, you've inflicted damage on China, but the bottom line is it's just an immutable law of economics that tax increases are passed on to the consumer, and that's what's happened with the tariffs that have been imposed. Tax increases have been passed on to American consumers. The average U.S. duty more than tripling from 1.6 to 5.4%. Foreign firms generally did not cut prices to compensate. Instead, approximately 100% of these import taxes have been passed on to U.S. importers and consumers, with the exception being steel imports. But even that is sort of a murky matter. So, the growth and the best of times, as you're describing, it's not because of the tariffs, it's in spite of them.
There's no question about that. And I do think the Federal Reserve made money easier because of the tariffs. Tariffs are a bad thing, and tariffs are anti-free trade. So I think we've talked about this before, too. The real critical people of Donald Trump and of Larry Kudlow are like, well, how can you call them free traders if they've instituted tariffs? If the tariffs, they believe, are a means to an end, they're a tool in this war, skirmish, whatever you want to call it, with China, and at the end of the day, everyone's going to drop their tariffs and declare free trade, then they were worth it. I mean, this trade war scared me from the beginning, because I always thought that China has far less to lose because they don't have to run for re-election, and we do here. I think that the best possible scenario has happened where it doesn't seem like it's affected us too bad. I was just going over crude demand with a crude trader last night. They were saying they really couldn't find any blips in demand from the trade war globally. And I think that that's a great thing, particularly if it leads to where we want to be. But are tariffs good? No, tariffs are awful, and they will definitely reverberate through the consumer.
He is Jim Iuorio. He is a CNBC contributor and also, I must say, the owner of Brandt's and Palatine, which
you need to bring us some
according
burgers.
to Jim, has the best burger in the Western Hemisphere.
Well,
Not just
decide.
According to Jim, according to other people, too.
Okay, according to all the Yelp reviews. Best burger in the Western Hemisphere. No, we got.
Why don't we get any love over here?
We got a
Jim?
broadcast from there so we can eat the burgers.
Well, it's 30 miles away from where you are, so they don't travel that great. But if you guys come out, it'll be fantastic. We'd have a good time.
All right, we're going to
You won't
work
be
on
sorry.
that. All right.
We have to do
Jim
that.
Iuorio, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. President Trump meeting with world leaders in Davos as the Senate opens its impeachment trial. J.C. Penney closing more stores by April. Those stories next. Let's talk about your 401k for a moment. If it's in the stock market, it's not necessarily safe. Remember the great financial crisis of 2008? Lou Dobbs here. Take a look at what the folks at Goldco have to say about protecting your 401k or IRA by adding physical gold and silver to it. Now, I'm not saying the world will end if you don't buy gold or silver, but I will tell you it's just common sense to diversify your retirement portfolio. Yes, the markets have been up and a lot